of ghost trains and fun houses, with zoetropes and whirring animation devices, with shadow shows and cleverly orchestrated tricks of the light that could make apparitions appear as if by magic. They had also seen 3D photographs, which date back to the 1840s. But the projection of a realistic moving image was still new enough to produce startled and even fearful reactions amongst those faced for the first time with the minute-long film of an oncoming train. Yet the history of cinema moves fast, and by 1915 audiences were happily settling down to D.W. Griffith's spectacular epic Birth of a Nation, a cinematic milestone marred by its unfortunate fondness for the Ku Klux Klan, and wondering whether noisy snacks would be available in the interval. Come the 20s, they were being treated to Cecil B. DeMille taking a walloping bash at the Ten Commandments and listening to Al Jolson telling them that they ain't heard nothing yet, thereby signalling the death knell of silent cinema. By the time the 30s rolled around, the emergence of full-colour 3-strip Technicolor seemed set to make black and white movies a thing of the past, although mainstream monochrome cinema would bravely soldier on for another 30 years. All of which meant that the audience who saw Louis Lumiere's newfangled 3D train film in Paris in 1935 would have been about as cine literate as most moviegoers are today, well versed in the all-singing, all-dancing razzmatazz of mainstream blockbusters, and highly unlikely to have been sent screaming from the theatre by the sight of an approaching train, 3D or not 3D. Moreover, if you actually bother to watch Louis' 3D remake, which I have, you'll discover that the approaching train very quickly breaks the left frame, just as it did in the original. But thanks to the miracle of 3D, this means that the train never appears to come out of the screen at all, merely to approach it. Oh! Nope. The truth of the matter is that if anyone ran away from l'arrivée d'un train, which they may not have done, but hey, print the legend, then they would have done it in 1896 rather than 1935, and the train from which they were fleeing would have been black and white, silent, and two-dimensional. It is this version of l'arrivée d'un train that has passed into popular folklore, because this is the version that everyone saw and talked about for years to come. As for the 3D version, who the hell has even heard of it? Be honest, unless you're a scholar of early cinema or an enthusiastic devotee of the tortured history of stereoscopic movies, then this late entry in the filmography of Louis Lumiere, who had effectively stopped making movies in 1901, is little more than a footnote, a curiosity, an intriguing but ultimately ephemeral bit of movie trivia, much like 3D itself. In a strangely poetic way, l'arrivée d'un train, one of the first films ever made, contains within its genetic pattern both the blueprint of all future cinema and the proof of the obsolescence of 3D. It exists in two versions, and only one of them is any good. What does all this prove? Simply that in their role as pioneers of modern movie making, the Lumiere brothers very quickly discovered both the magic and the limitations of cinema. They patented their cinematograph in 1895, toured the world with their amazing device in 1896, patented an octagonal disc stereo device in 1900, and then effectively gave up filmmaking to pursue other projects, having concluded that the cinema is an invention without any future. Others were more stubborn, for better or worse, and experiments with allegedly new cinematic formats, including 3D, continued throughout the 20th century. According to Ray Zone, the first public presentation of anaglyph motion pictures in America took place in 1915 at the Astor Theatre, New York, where viewers got to experience the dreary brown smudge produced by wearing those red-blue glasses, a process that dates back to the mid-19th century, that have now become shorthand for old-school 3D. Multiple anaglyph shorts followed, with the 1922 feature The Power of Love, which many cite as the first ticket-paying 3D feature, reportedly, and perhaps apocryphally, allowing the audience to watch alternate endings through either the red or blue lenses. How's that for a gimmick? In 1936, the anaglyph oddity Audioscopics was nominated for an Academy Award in the splendidly self-explanatory Best Short Subject Novelty category. If only Avatar had been eligible for a Novelty Award. In the same year, Edwin H. Land started demonstrating his version of the polarized 3D system, with which we are now all depressingly familiar, and which we are all being assured is, once again, the future of cinema. Meanwhile, in Nazi Germany, Goebbels had become a 3D fan, his propaganda ministry commissioning Raum film or space film productions such as So Real You Can Touch It and 6 Girls Roll Into Weekend, which kicked off a long-standing Third Reich obsession with 3D, They were also into occult magic, numerology, and time travel. Later, and with some poetic justice, the Allies used 3D photography to identify and destroy Nazi missile silos in Operation Crossbow, reckoned by some to be the world's first 3D-powered military operation. Outside of warfare, however, 3D remained little more than a novelty, with film studios and moviegoers continuing to show little interest in or enthusiasm for the format, despite its great technical leaps forward. And then, in the early 50s, everything changed, and the reason for the change was not artistic, but financial, driven not by consumer demand, but by studio pressure. Sounds familiar? As always, the main impetus for the so-called 3D revolution in cinema was the need to compete with the home viewing market, which was threatening to put a major dent in box office figures. In the early 50s, the greatest threat to cinema, at least as far as the studios and theatres were concerned, was the rapid rise of television, with oversized sets becoming more established items of household furniture than three-piece suites and handy heated hostess serving racks. Why pay good money schlepping the family to the local flea pit when you could all watch stuff at home for free? The movie industry's answer was to big up the whole theatrical experience with widescreen framing and projection, scorching colour, epic spectacle, and inevitably pointy 3D, all doing their damnedest to lure punters out of their sitting rooms and back into the cinemas. In 1952, Buona Devil offered audiences a lion in your lap, a lover in your arms, neither of which, like that hoary old joke about lobster thermidor, you were going to get at home. In 1953, Jane Russell starred in the stereoscopic romp The French Line, the tagline for which promised that she'll knock both your eyes out, misses. Meanwhile, Jack Arnold's Creature from the Black Lagoon delivered a man in a rubber suit with weird gills emerging from the watery depths and looming toward the camera with his arms outstretched, an image that still holds an enduring fascination for nostalgic horror and sci-fi fans today. Until fairly recently, this delightfully creaky creature feature had a place in history as the only 3D movie to spawn a successful stereoscopic sequel, Revenge of the Creature, boasting an early appearance by Clint Eastwood. Although by the time they got round to shooting the third instalment, The Creature Walks Among Us, the 3D craze had run its course and it was back to good old flat-screen business as usual. Alongside such high-kicking anomalies as Kiss Me Kate, the two 3D titles that everyone seems to remember and revere from this period are House of Wax, the first 3D film to boast stereo sound, and Alfred Hitchcock's allegedly epochal Dial M for Murder. In 2005, my partner Linda Ruth Williams and I programmed a History of Horror season at London's National Film Theatre, in which we included a 3D screening of House of Wax, the film which had briefly established horror legend Vincent Price as the reigning king of 3D. He went on to star in The Mad Magician, Son of Sinbad, and Dangerous Mission, all shot and widely projected in 3D. The print we showed was old and somewhat colour-faded, and we'd had some difficulty securing the rights to screen it since Warner Brothers was in the process of remaking House of Wax and had therefore withdrawn the old version from circulation, a traditional marketing ploy designed to prevent a remake being unfavourably compared to the original. As it turned out, the new version of House of Wax, which was made in 2D, was notable only for a scene in which Paris Hilton is violently dismembered on screen, a gruesome highlight that drew uncomfortable murmurs of approval from audiences. Anyway, in my introduction to the 1952 House of Wax, I pointed out that the audience, who were all peering at me through their retro 3D glasses, were about to watch a movie that the director had never seen, because, as any fool know, André de Toth famously had only one eye, and was therefore monocular. Significantly, this didn't stop him from helming what was to become one of the most respected stereoscopic movies of the period, a Natural Vision 3D production, publicity for which promised that beauty and terror meet in your seat, with the movie coming right at you to ensure that the hand is at your throat, the kiss is on your lips. Not for de Toth, however, who could only see the film in 2D, but who always said that it looked just fine to him that way. Vincent Price later remembered that de Toth would go to the rushes and say, "Why is everybody so excited about this? It didn't mean anything to him." Is there not a lesson to be learned here? As for Dial M for Murder, there's no doubting the film's enduring artistic stature, and it's easy to see why today's 3D pioneers constantly refer to it as a format-justifying landmark. In my own experience as a 3D skeptical film journalist, I've had everyone from John Lasseter to Martin Scorsese attempt to convince me that stereoscopy is an artistically valid cinematic process by citing the precedent of Dial M for Murder. with Hitchcock at the helm, Ray Milland and Grace Kelly as the leads, an already proven stage screenplay by Frederick Knott, and a soundtrack by Dmitry Tiomkin, Dial M for Murder was always going to be a cut above the exploitation schlock on which 3D thrived, and its champions still point to it as proof of the immersive qualities of the format. No one, they argued, complained about being alienated by the usual pointy clichés of 3D when it came to Dial M. On the contrary, audiences were drawn into the story, which continues to thrill and engross viewers to this day. It's a good argument, sadly undermined by the fact that the main reason no one complained was that almost no one ever saw Dial M in 3D. Released simultaneously in 2D and 3D versions, the film promptly became a flat-screen hit, with 3D prints being left to moulder on the shelf until they were nostalgically revived in the 80s. And, as far as anyone can tell, the audiences who lapped up the 2D version didn't go complaining to theatre managers that the movie was in any way non-immersive. Because it wasn't. As for Hitchcock, he significantly never went near 3D again, having clearly decided that the whole thing was a waste of time and money. 6 years later, Hitchcock would make Psycho, recently voted the greatest horror film of all time, in black and white. So much for the inevitable march of technology. The reasons 3D failed to set the world alight during its so-called golden age in the early 50s were pretty similar to the reasons it still sucks today. Although the initial novelty value was high, audiences and critics soon started complaining about the eye strain, headaches and smudgy darkened pictures that inevitably resulted from the donning of 3D glasses. The Russians had experimented with the lenticular screen 3D process which worked without glasses in the 40s, but the strict viewing angle significantly limited audience size. More significantly, the fleeting rise of 3D happened alongside the emergence of CinemaScope's anamorphic widescreen system, which was itself referred to in publicity puffs as offering an immersive 3D experience due to the sheer size and scale of the projected image. Promotional materials for Fox's CinemaScope flagship The Robe showed the actors' faces apparently breaking the boundaries of the screen in the manner of 3D posters, while the tagline called it "the miracle you can see without glasses." Unlike Cinerama, which had made the front pages in 1952 with its curved screen and interlocked triple projectors, CinemaScope's anamorphic systems compressed a widescreen image, later standardized at 235:1, nearly twice the width of the traditional Academy 133:1, onto a single 35mm film strip, thereby rendering it both impressive and, more importantly, widely available. Although Cinerama would continue to offer a deluxe viewing experience akin to today's IMAX theatres, it was Fox's more populist system which effectively killed 3D, proving that immersion in a picture had nothing to do with stereoscopy and everything to do with scope. In the wake of Scope and the subsequent competing anamorphic systems that made widescreen pretty much standard fare, 3D crawled back into the cupboard and audiences got on with enjoying cinema in all its immersive monocular glory. Oh, stereoscopy never went away. In the 60s, the 3D novelty was used to flog a number of cheapy anaglyph exploitation creature features, while the development of the over-under process that printed two widescreen images, one above the other within a single square frame, allowed for polarized projection from a single strip of film, although the image remained dark and less than pin clear. In 1966, Buona Devil helmsman Arch Oboler enjoyed some space vision success with the sci-fi romp The Bubble, the picture floats off the screen and over your head, while in 1969, the stewardesses promised to leap from the screen onto your lap, thanks to the miracle of stereo vision, which squished two anamorphic images side by side onto the same frame. Costing a mere $100,000, the stewardesses went on to serve up a hefty $27 million at the box office, making it, in terms of cost-to-profit ratio, the most successful 3D movie ever. Think about that. With its conservatively estimated price tag of $250 million, Avatar returned its initial investment cost at a paltry profit ratio of 1 to 12, while the stewardesses raked in an arousing 1 to 270. Forget Smurfs in space, when it comes to 3D, nothing sells like Hooters on a plane. And if the success of stereoscopic knockers doesn't tell you everything